kind of terrifying. So I was asked to give a lecture about my dissertation and what I did and kind of the process of becoming a doctor, specifically Squalo-doctor, which is what all my underlings called me after I defended. All right, so a little bit about my stats. I am from Seattle, Washington originally, and this would be very formative considering Washington has a great fossil record of whales. So I got a bachelor's at University of Washington, and then moved all the way across the country to go to George Mason University, where I got my master's and PhD. Outside of that, I've done some work for the National Park Service. And yes, now I'm doing postdoctoral research at the Calvert Marine Museum, where I'm pursuing my unhealthy obsession with whales, particularly their taxonomy, anatomy, evolutionary relationships, and primarily toothed whales. Toothed whales are my favorites. My inspiration has been Moby Dick. I am obsessed with Moby Dick. I'm always the person with way too much information about whales, but hopefully y'all are not like everyone on The Office who frowns at the broccoli. Ishmael's always, well, always. I was really struck by his love of whales and his scientific interest in whales, his love of their taxonomy. And so that was very formative. So yeah, at the University of Washington, that is where I got my bachelor's. I have a baby picture of me from 2015. One thing that was really interesting to me at University of Washington, something I didn't realize when I first went there, is that it has a thriving paleobiology department. So that's we have an annual photo that we take every year at meetings where, basically see the entirety of the family as it's grown. And as I mentioned at the top, we have a great fossil record of whales in Washington State. And so at the Burke Museum there, we have a ton of whale fossils. So that's where I first started doing my research as an undergrad. And then, like I said, I moved to George Mason University to work with the eminent whale paleontologist, Dr. Mark Uhen, which he's depicted right here, that science dad. Yes, he's very knowledgeable, especially about the earliest whales. And so my master's thesis I did on early dolphins because that's my interest. But when I was way back in undergrad, very interested in a group called the Squalodontidae, which is a very prominent cetacean in the fossil record of Maryland, as we have well, 3 different species of squalodon in the Calvert Cliffs. So part of the process of getting a PhD is that you have to draft a proposal to a committee, people who are going to grill you through different stages of your PhD. And you have to show them, what you plan to do, why it's important work to be done. Yes, that sort of thing. Also, they'll grill you about your methods. And it's also a chance for you to show them how much research you've done already to prove I can actually do this project. So Squalodon's been an interest of mine. I read this paper in German, like back when I was an undergrad, and thought, wow, Squalodon seems like a really hot mess, but surely someone will fix it by the time that I'm working on my PhD. Well, spoiler, no one had. So I was immediately like, this is what I got to do. Squalodon is a toothed whale. It's been around from about 26 million years ago all the way up to 15 or 16 million years ago. It's a very long record. It is primarily located in the North Atlantic, and we have representatives from the east coast of North America and from Europe. And that's pretty much where they only are. You might see there are some dots along the Pacific Rim, but I went through those records and found that they were all questionable at best. So pretty safely can say Squalodon's limited to the North Atlantic. Its most famous member, as I alluded to, is Squalodon calvertensis from the Calvert Formation. Squalodon is kind of a forgotten icon, and something that I fully didn't realize when I started was that Squalodon was the first described fossil odontocete. It was real popular back in the day as, everything that had these, triangular shaped teeth with the little cusps on them, that was a squalodon. However, because of that, a lot of fragmentary material was collected and given names. So for example, we have things that are named off of a singular tooth. And that is a pretty bad specimen when we're talking about odontocetes. But we do have some really gorgeous specimens too, like here's Squalodon berriensis. And it was in general a huge dumpster fire. No one had revised it. No one had described important species since the 1800s. So a lot of these, either had very rudimentary pictures or no pictures at all. They were in foreign languages, etc. Some type specimens were not even accounted for. Like they've been totally lost. So it was good for a dissertation. Like it was a good project. So in my proposal, I laid out the different steps. So step one was going to be to take out the trash. So my research question here was what species within the Squalodontidae have diagnostic holotypes? Now, holotype is essentially the specimen that is used as the definition of what that species is. So for Squalodon calvertensis, it's at the Smithsonian. It's a very nice specimen. If I found a Squalodon calvertensis at the cliffs tomorrow, I could take it to the Smithsonian, compare it against that specimen, be like, yep, that's calvertensis. In toothed whales, the most important regions of the skull are the ones that I've circled in purple and blue. You have the vertex, so that's where the nostril is. You have the bottom part of the cranium that has a lot of detail. And strangely enough, the two ear bones here, the tympanic bulla and the periotic. So had to look at what species in the scientific record had these features preserved, because if those holotypes had those features preserved, the name was probably good. How many species therefore have those diagnostic type specimens and therefore are valid? So another researcher had done this for the North Atlantic record, started with 16 species and wound up with 2, Squalodon calvertensis and Squalodon woodmori. So I figured there'd be some pretty significant attrition. So yeah, some of the trash. Teeth are not great for diagnosing toothed whales. They're just a little bit too similar between all different types that it's not super helpful. So after I would take out the trash, then it would become to evaluate the type species. So the type species is kind of like the holotype specimen of a, but for a genus. So that is the species against which we'll use to judge if something belongs to that genus or not. So there are 2 genera within the Squalodontidae. There's Squalodon and Eosqualodon. Now, hard to keep them straight sometimes. Spoilers. So we wanted to know, or I wanted to know, what anatomical traits characterize those type species within that family. Plus, the type species of Squalodon was it was a hot mess. We'll get into why it was a hot mess. Then are these 2 the most closely related to each other? Do they form a sister group where they're each other's closest relatives? And then lastly, I was curious about what anatomical traits we could use to distinguish, the different species of Squalodon from one another, Squalodon from Eosqualodon, and then what would set apart the family Squalodontidae from all other toothed whales. So then the last step was evolutionary analysis. And anyone who knows me as a scientist for long enough knows I can talk about these sorts of things until I'm blue in the face. I love these sorts of analyses. So in the biz, we call this a phylogenetic analysis. They basically reconstruct evolutionary relationships either using genetic data or morphological traits. And we put that all into an algorithm that creates these sorts of trees. So my research question for that was, do all members of the Squalodontidae form what we call a monophyletic group? Monophyletic group basically means they cluster with one single common ancestor. So kind of like your family comes from your two grandparents, that would be your single common ancestor. So we want to see that on an evolutionary scale. Then question 2, where do the Squalodontidae belong in the tree of toothed whales? And then lastly, does the inclusion of this family matter on the larger scale evolution of traits? Right, we want to understand the evolution of different characters within the Squalodontidae. Oh,
There was a question came in on the chat.
yeah.
When you say from 16 to 2 species, is 2 the number of holotypes found, or is 2 the number of separate species after
Separate
compare?
species,
Thank you.
most of which though only have a single specimen, which is the holotype. So it's kind of the same thing, but it is a technical difference. Thank you for asking. And so, yeah, we wanted to know if the Squalodontidae can tell us anything about the larger picture of Odontocean evolution. I am especially interested in teeth, so I was especially focused on teeth. So why was I so focused on teeth? Well, we have some hypotheses about where the Squalodontidae and other what we would call heterodont, meaning they have different teeth from the front to the back, much like us humans do. We wanted to know, is the evolution of teeth that all look the same? All modern toothed whales have teeth that are essentially like little cones. Is that exclusive to the group of modern toothed whales? Yes, modern toothed whales here in yellow. Or did that evolve multiple times? And so a really crucial group for that sort of study was this one right here in the blue that we call the Planistoidea. Its only living member is the South Asian river dolphin, but there was a hypothesis that maybe some heterodont toothed whales did actually belong in this group, which would then require that a homodont dentition, so a dentition where all the teeth are the same, that had to evolve at least 3 times. So I was curious, like, do we have convergent evolution of this thing that sets toothed whales apart from other species of mammals? So to do this, I actually had to go abroad. Most of these specimens were all in Europe. So I got to do a very fun research trip in the middle of a pandemic in 2022. I went to 3 countries in 3 weeks, each with their own COVID policies. At least they were all within the EU. So that did make my life a little easier. I had a 4th museum I wanted to see. No, come back. In Italy, I'm actually going to go there in like 3.5 weeks. So I'm really excited. I will get to see more Squalodon. So the first part of the trip was that my flight was canceled and my bag was lost with research equipment inside. A lesson was learned because I spent 5 days extremely worried that my bag had been just left out somewhere at JFK International Airport and that all of those research equipment would be gone because it was like cameras and stuff that looks valuable. I will never do that again. It was awful. I got chewed out by my parents. I got chewed out by my advisor. I got chewed out by friends. So yeah, no, never doing that again. So the first country I went to was Belgium. Belgium is about the size of Maryland, and I stayed in the city of Ghent, and the museum was in Brussels. 40-minute train ride was, something very weird to an American where you're like, this is your whole country. I can go across it in an hour and a half. So why did I go to Belgium? So this is where the type species of Squalodon great lupii, is housed. You'll note that I say it's a cast. That will be important later. It's not the actual physical real deal holotype. But there were some really cool things to see. Like there are these iguanodons that are like beautifully mounted with this cool blue light at the museum. And it was, that was awesome to see. I also really loved that they put taxidermy birds throughout their dinosaur exhibit. So you'd have like a triceratops and then an ostrich. I think these guys were like next to some other sort of ceratopsian, but it was just like, that's awesome. That's charming. The nice thing about doing international research travel is you get to go do fun stuff on your weekends, which include eating really good food, drinking really good beer, and seeing things that you don't see in the US, like Gothic cathedrals and castles. I was staying with a friend and we were in the city center, and I'm like, that's just a castle, like right there. And he goes, yeah, it's been there a while, like whatever. You could go the next town over and see a different castle. And I'm like, you okay, you've been to America, you know what it's like. Yes, I'm uncultured. I get it. So the next stop was Germany. And in Germany, it wasn't like a major city like Ghent or Brussels. It was this teeny little provincial town called Bunda, which is within North Rhine-Westphalia. And the major cities there are like Dusseldorf, Cologne. It's in the western part, as you can see. So the reason I stopped at this tiny little provincial town where no one really spoke English, I do know German generally well enough to understand it, read it, write it, but to talk it, not so much. But I went there because that is where the holotype of Squalodon languagevicii is. And that is our type species of Eosqualodon. It's a beautiful skull, excellently preserved. Yeah, it was an absolute delight to be there. I was treated like a king because they would make me coffee and cake and sorts of things. Again, you eat well when abroad in Europe. Other cool things that they have there is, so they have a Nomotherium, which is a type of Sirenian. So those are also present in the Calvert Cliffs. So we see kind of parallel ecosystems potentially. Another thing, yeah, in Germany, you have these different, they're called Stolpersteine, which literally means stumbling stones, and they mark where different Jewish people were deported. And you see them a lot in major cities. And I was just walking around the town center and saw one, and it was very, very sobering. It was a very interesting experience. I did make the news. Like I said, it was like, they were like, an American is in our town. Like, what? Why would she come out here? So yeah, I made their news. It is all off Deutsch, but it basically is American research fossil from Bunda. The mayor wanted to meet me. It was an experience. Something I will not forget. So the last stop was France, to the city of Lyon, which is, I keep losing my cursor. I left my laser pointer at home. I know, terrible. Which is in this region of France here. So the reason I went there was for this gorgeous specimen, Squalodon baryensis. It is beautiful, as you can tell from the picture. It looks like it died yesterday. The middle ear of this animal is preserved. You can see it in this picture. You have the hammer, the stirrup, and the anvil preserved on both sides. Just amazing. The museum looked like a spaceship. Like, I think it looked like the Millennium Falcon. And it was at the confluence of like these two rivers in the city. It was a very cool museum. And again, I don't know if you can call this eating well, but I had this thing called a tacos. Yes, tacos is singular. It has like halal meat and French fries. It was bizarre. And I'm like, why am I eating this? But then I found out it's a street food that was created in Lyon. So it was like, came all the way to France to eat French cuisine, I guess. Some other fun things I did. I went to cathedrals and stuff we don't get here in the US, and really old cemeteries, which you do see, but yeah, I went to the catacombs. It was awesome. Then flew out. So that was a great trip. And something, yeah, that makes doing your PhD special. You really get to do some very formative experiences. It's kind of the first time that your advisor kicks you out and see if you can fly on your own as a researcher, how well you function. And it was a good test. And I came out feeling way more confident myself as a scientist. So what were my end results? So I have here the abbreviated defense. Yeah, another Moby Dick reference because I have to. I have a card game. It's like Cards Against Humanity. You fill in the blanks with random Moby Dick quotes. So I have here, my dissertation considers the relationship between a dinnerless student and deep helpless sadness. Which if that doesn't summarize the grad student life, I don't know what does. So step one, right? Taking out the trash. So I found a lot of really fragmentary holotypes, some of which are very historic. So this species here, Squalodon melitensis, it was the first cetacean fossil ever illustrated. It's from a book from 1670. But unfortunately, there's not enough there, right? We have very little information other than teeth. We can say that's definitely Squalodon, but beyond that, who's to say? But we do have some very beautiful fossils as well. As I alluded to, we've got Squalodon baryensis and Squalodon lingavicii, but we also have some very beautiful specimens housed in Padua. And those are the ones that I'm really excited to go see. And some of these also, they have multiple specimens. So then we can start asking questions about what's what is individual variation in a species? What might be related to being a juvenile versus an adult? All sorts of questions that we don't usually get to ask about fossil whales. We're usually limited to one specimen of each species. So here's my revised species list. So I have my good species with diagnostic holotypes. You see I have 6, quite the decrease. There was one question mark. Hypothetically is good, but it's never been like properly prepped out. It's in a museum that's hard to get to. So I kind of had to toss up my hands at that one. And then a bunch of these belong in the trash with Oscar. One of which was, in fact, the type species of Squalodon. So that was a problem. I needed to think about that. Some of them were never actually given holotypes. They were just described and not actually with no specimen attached. Some were named using type specimens that belong to other species. It was a wild ride going through all these really old manuscripts, many of which were non-foreign languages. Thank you, Google Translate. You've really improved over the years. So then step 2, evaluate our type species. So first that was looking at Squalodon lingavicii, and Squalodon has some very interesting features that really set it apart both from all other toothed whales and from Squalodon. Particularly, it has huge space for jaw musculature. It has like this like little space. You see this in like dogs and cats. They actually have a space for muscle attachment in the jaw. Most toothed whales don't have that. Most toothed whales actually make more space for part of the echolocation apparatus there. It also has all of this room here for jaw muscle attachment. So I really want to know what this thing was chomping into. Other fun things that happened when I first read about Squalodon lingavicii, I was told there are no ear bones for this animal. Like there's one that's still in place. It's been kind of glued there by the sediment. But yeah, no can do. You can't really make any determinations off of that. And then I got to the museum and there they were sitting in the display. And I was like, how did this happen? And it was a very interesting story. According to the curator there, the skull had been sent to Berlin for prep. And then when Germany was split, the skull made it back, but the ear bones did not. So then after reunification, the Museum for Naturkunde in Berlin was going through their records and was like, oh, this belongs to a museum in former West Germany. So you can actually see like the stamp here that still says, the abbreviation in German for East Germany. I thought that was so cool. So then, yes, I had to come back to Squalodon. Squalodon was a taxonomic headache. For a very well-known species, because we have Calvertensis, the type species was, a menace. So problem 1, we didn't even know what the type species of Squalodon was for a while. Another researcher did some phenomenal translation and, digging through old books and figured out that it was this taxon Squalodon great lupii, which has a holotype from France. It's this guy here. Problem number 2, there aren't any diagnostic regions that are preserved. So then I had to ask myself, is there anything on this cast that is really distinctive enough for me to say it's not like any other species of squalodon, because that would have been enough. And ultimately, I had to be like, well, it's definitely Squalodon. I can tell you that much, but there's nothing distinctly unique about it that would tell me, okay, it's different from other species of Squalodon. And then problem 3, kind of like I buried the lead. Because problem 3 was the original holotype does not exist. In 1923, there was a very prestigious whale paleontologist who was at the Smithsonian Remington Kellogg, who described Calvertensis, and he looked through all the records related to the Squalodontidae and said, it's missing. So that was a big bummer. I looked through the rules on this. So there's an international code of zoological nomenclature. So we have rules for how you can name things. And according to those rules, a man-made cast can't be a holotype. It has to be the actual real deal specimen. So I was like, well, oof, that's a problem. So therefore, the recourse for that is to designate what we call a neotype, a new type. By identifying a species that could be combined with Squalodon greylupii. For this, I settled on Squalodon variensis. So it had this beautiful glow up from a very partial cast that couldn't actually serve as a holotype to the neotype of greylupii, which is this beautifully preserved skull. I had to make arguments for why this was a good idea. Mainly, they're both from approximately the same time in the same area, so I think that's good enough. Oh yeah, so it had this beautiful magical transformation, just like Elsa. So other things that I found very interesting, right? Part of my research was to look at, is there anything about the Squalodontidae, the family as a whole, that sets it apart from other toothed whales? The answer was, strangely enough, the teeth. I thought that the teeth would not be super significant. And on their own, they're generally not. But taken as a whole, they are very distinctive. So all members of the Squalodontidae have these basically straight out pointy teeth in the front. And then they have a set number of like incisor-like teeth and a set form of double-rooted teeth. And that is across all species. I was shook. Did not expect that. I thought it would be very variable because in modern toothed whales, individuals within a species can have wildly varying tooth counts. Some of them might have 40, others might have 60. So to see it so strict like other mammals, I thought very interesting. Some other fun things that I found out through the course of my research is that there is no crossover between the North American and European records. So I thought it's very plausible, right? We know that modern toothed whales can go all over the world. Like there are bottlenose dolphins basically everywhere. So surely these guys shouldn't have any problem dispersing, but for some reason, maybe we just haven't found them yet. But I mean, people do a lot of work in the Calvert Cliffs, and we've never found any of these European species in the Calvert Cliffs. I would love to. Likewise, we've not seen anything we could refer to Squalodon calvertensis or Whitmorei or the new species Murdochi in Europe. So yeah, there seems to be a very fundamental split where some of them use the dollar and others use the euro, and that is just how it is. So the evolutionary analysis portion, the part that I was so excited. As I alluded to earlier, extant toothed whales, so modern ones, have dental traits that are unique to mammals. They have more teeth than mammals usually do. Mammals usually have a pretty set number of teeth. And they're all homodont, so all the teeth are the same. So this is embodied by our bottlenose dolphin. Early toothed whales were much more like their direct ancestors, so things like Durodon or Zygorrhiza, where they have pretty mammalian dentition. Their teeth are differentiated from front to back. It is a set number. It does not change unless there's some sort of, pathology or illness. They have, 2 different eruptions of teeth. Toothed whales only have one. So we know that toothed whales came from animals with a typical mammalian dentition. So how do we get to this very unique dentition? We know that Polydontes, so having more teeth than usual, appears really early in toothed whales. They appear within a group called the Xenorophidae at 29 million years ago. So then I was like, well, did it Homodonty evolve multiple times or just once? Because we have had hypotheses where it evolves multiple times. We, as people who do these sorts of evolutionary analyses, we love the idea of Occam's razor. We want the simplest explanation to be the best. So we look for evolutionary trees where the amount of change is minimized. And if there is a tree where, it requires more changes, we better have really good evidence that that's so. So my hypothesis one here is the simplest tree. We have a modern toothed whale dentition, like our bottlenose dolphin friend here, that evolves once. Whereas for hypothesis two, like I showed earlier, it has to evolve 3 times. Once here, because sperm whales have that same sort of dentition as our bottlenose dolphin. And then again here, so that, our South Asian river dolphin can have teeth like other dolphins. And then a 3rd time here, so that dolphins can have their dolphin teeth. That's not simple. So we need some really good evidence. And part of what was causing issues was that these toothed whales with heterodont teeth were not super well represented in our analyses. So I added like all of the Squalodontidae. It was quite a labor of love. It was like, does including better representation of like the family Squalodontidae and other early toothed whales, does that improve our understanding of the evolution of Homodonty? And it sure did. I only got one single evolution of this dolphin-like dentition. So all these guys here, they have something like our friend Squalodon, where we have differentiated teeth from front to back. And once you get to basically this point right here in the tree where sperm whales start to branch off onto their own tree, you have a single evolution of Homodonty. It still could be convergent. My work's just demonstrated that our evidence for convergent evolution is not these guys being up here with the Ganges River dolphin or the South Asian river dolphin. So what am I up to now? I'm up to more Squalodon. That's essentially what I'm up to. Important and historic specimens still wait to be described in museum collections. Understanding like, possible juvenile to adult sequences, that still remains to be done. I am firm in my conviction that there's a baby Calvertensis at the Smithsonian. But yeah, like this guy here, Squalodon bellunensis, beautiful specimen. We have like 3 beautiful specimens of this guy. It was first described in 1916 in Italian, and there are images. They're fine. They're not great because lithographic plates did not have the best resolution, not like, my Nikon. So yeah, I will be going to Padua in like the first week of July to collect data on 3 different species of Squalodon. Some of them were never even formally described. There's still a lot of work to be done. I'm still very passionate about them. I'm obviously quite excited to go to Italy and eat really well. And then more evolutionary analysis. Like I said, I am obsessed with this sort of thing. I'm obsessed with the methods of phylogenetic analysis. So, for example, there's a flaw in my analysis that I knew was there. I could correct for it, but we would like to not have to correct through it by basically strong arming it with molecular data. We would like the morphological data and the molecular data to arrive at the same answer. And particularly problematic groups are sperm whales and beaked whales. They're very poorly represented in this analysis, so the weirdos tend to clump together, even though molecular data tells us that's not the case. And then also could help us understand relationships of another classic Maryland Calvert dolphin, the Urinodelphinids. This is the one that's hanging up at the Calvert Marine Museum. we really don't know where these guys belong in the toothed whale family tree. So maybe including them in our phylogenetic analysis will help us understand where they go. So thank you for your time. I hope I didn't go on for too long. Yeah, thanks to like my committee who grilled me after my dissertation. All the curatorial staff who like made sure I was fed and had access to specimens. Yeah, people who provided pictures of different things. A dissertation requires a lot of people to help a single person get it done. So I'll answer any questions you might have about Squalodon. Yes.
There's a question in chat, which I was also wondering about too. Any ideas on why there's no overlap between the North American and European species?
I really have no idea because the North Atlantic doesn't really pose, at least like that east-west gradient doesn't pose the same sort of problems as north-south gradients do. So we know that some toothed whales, actually a lot of toothed whales, do not like extremely warm ocean temperatures. So a lot of toothed whales are basically they're in the mid-latitudes on either side of the equator. And there are some groups that absolutely cannot tolerate hot water. So at times where it was cooler, they were able to go across the equator. And now we actually have two different species on each side of the equator. So that poses a problem, but across ocean basins, not so much. I think that we have a very poor understanding of dispersal patterns of whales throughout the Cenozoic. We have some ideas, but no one's really looked at how do these animals move. And part of that is because for a lot of species, we only have that one single specimen. But I think when we look at things even larger, that might help. Yeah.
Are there other things in the Calvert Marine Museum collection?
Squalodon or otherwise? Yeah, so I actually was able to collect more data on Squalodon murdochi than what was initially published earlier technically last year now. And I was actually able to include that now in my evolutionary analyses. So that is very fun. I've been very interested in urinodelphinids. We have God's quantity of them at the Calvert Marine Museum. So a volunteer calls them like the rats of the Calvert Formation. Everything's really mean. But on the flip side, we do have a lot of them. So that opens up questions of, what does variation look like? We have a really good idea of what variation looks like in modern things because we can go out and catch them or we find them dead on the beach. But for fossils, again, the single specimen comes to bite us where that becomes very difficult. So I would love to actually examine the urinodelphinids and try to understand like how do they grow? What does a juvenile look like versus an adult? So that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish at the museum, aside from Squalodon or Squalodon. Yeah.
Two questions. One, what did they eat? And two, how do we think the Squalodontidae communicated with each other?
So from like the base of the Odontocetes fossil record, they can echolocate. Echolocation is a like very, very ancestral trait. So based on different features of the skull, we can say these animals were also capable of echolocating. So that was probably like their main mode of communication, much like dolphins or sperm whales do. I mean, we hardly understand how modern things communicate, but they would have used some system similar. I think we can also figure out some of that from looking at like the internal structures of the ear. But I don't think that work has really been done for Squalodon, examining, how is the inner ear formed and what does that tell us about what they can hear? What they ate, right? Like the real clincher for what something ate is like stomach contents. Don't have those. Weirdly enough, I was actually pondering this like literally right before I left to drive up here because I'm finishing up my paper on Squalodon to send that out. Because I was thinking like you have these juicy sirenians to eat at the let's see. Let's put Anomotherium on blast. Right, you've got this juicy guy to nosh on. Oh, did the projector go? Oh, rude,
It's unusual.
rude.
There it is.
Okay, yeah, you've got
Like to be called.
yeah, you've got this guy to eat. So I was looking basically for what indicators of the teeth would tell us that Eosqualodon ate big things. I haven't really done that sort of study yet, mainly because just describing these things took like all of my life for 2 years. So that's future research. For example, some of the members of Squalodon that are at this museum in Padua, their teeth are very worn. So that could tell us something about what they were eating. Eosqualodon, I thought would have a lot of tooth wear. It turns out it doesn't. But other things that were macrophagous, also meaning they eat big things, like a juicy Sirenian, don't show a ton of tooth wear because they're actually eating like the softest parts of it. So what they're eating, yeah, I was literally thinking about this earlier today. I still like the idea of Eosqualodon eating this guy. That'd be good. So yeah, for Squalodon itself, I'm honestly not so sure. I've been really wanting to take a look at the specimens in Padua to start and collect that sort of data. They've got a lot of wear on their teeth.
One more. Actually, a couple more coming.
I mean, I can talk about Squalodon
Yeah.
for like literal hours.
Well, here's a question, I think, more about the academic career path. For
Yes.
those who might not know.
Talk about that.
Rich says, I missed whether your PhD is done. Well, you do have your PhD.
Yes, I defended. I'm donezo. I'm
So why
sort
are
of
you
free.
still researching, I guess? You're going to Italy to see more of these. You must really love your work.
Yeah, so for a lot of PhDs, like the whole purpose is to continue research. A lot of research institutions won't hire you if you don't have a PhD. Like universities, like if I went down to George Mason University as a grad student, I said, give me a professorship, they'd be like, well, you don't have a PhD, like go get your PhD first. So a lot of those sorts of institutions require a PhD. It's basically like a stamp on your resume that tells an institution you can do this kind of work. So yeah, my goal is to stay in research and keep studying these sorts of things.
And then, is there an environmental bias in the units that the squalodonts are found in? Shallow coastal waters, productivity?
Yeah, so we are very constrained by what rock is preserved. What's interesting is that my advisor, along with another co-author, actually like looked at did a study of the rock record to see how much is cetacean diversity through time driven by the rock record. And they found that diversity actually seems to be a true signal that's not closely tied to the rock record. It can be closely tied to where there are researchers, like for example, wild diversity in New Zealand. That's because there was a prolific researcher there for decades. So that's why we have a lot of things from New Zealand. Places that are still under exploration have fewer species known. So my first concern is like, okay, just where are people working? Cetaceans in general do prefer coastal waters. There are pelagic species for sure, meaning they live out in the open ocean. They are few and far between. And a lot of times we don't know about them. We only know about them when they wash up dead on the beach. Where'd you come from? So in terms of diversity, trying to go back to actually answer the question, the fact that most cetaceans are coastal does like bring me a certain sort of comfort in that we're capturing them in an environment that they like to be in. We'll likely not really know much about the ones that live in truly deep waters, just by virtue of where rock's exposed and what sort of rock is exposed. Any other questions? Even just about whales, like I love whales. Yeah. Yes. There was a huge number of toothed whales. Stephen and another co-author released a chapter of basically like the paleontology of the Calvert Cliffs. And they looked at the toothed whale record, and that document, when I got it, was like over 100 pages long. There are a ton of toothed whales. Yeah, this area was really a really great place for them to thrive because you got things to eat. It's a coastal ecosystem, so we tend to see a lot of them preserved. Yeah, there's all sorts. We have, again, like the Uranodelphinids. We have early relatives of like modern dolphins called the Kentriodontids. We have got Squalodon. We have things that are closely related to the Ganges River dolphin in the Calvert Formation, and I think more upper ones too. There are tons. So I'm at a very good institution for my interests. Any other questions? Yeah. So one thought is, and we always have this thought when we see something kind of weird, is that like, is this like sexual dimorphism? And we have cetaceans, modern day ones, where we see that very obviously. Beaked whales oftentimes have sexual dimorphism, where males have tusks and females don't. Narwhals, the tusked ones are exclusively male. So that's an idea. And unless we see like a very distinct, like, okay, half of these animals have it, half of these animals do not, but they're the same thing, the same species, that's when we start to be like, oh, sexual dimorphism. We don't have enough specimens really to do that. I was again reading another paper today when I was drafting my paper on Squalodon, where it could be for piercing. Their teeth don't tend to be very damaged. At least I can't really see damage. Like be like, that's definitely not just the fossil record being mean to you post-mortem. So that's an idea. Some just think it's like a display or communication. Probably is not for, so some features are for species recognition, so that different species can tell one from the other. Probably not the case because that's something all squalodontids have. So yeah, I'm still wondering. Especially other things do have really procumbent teeth like that. But they tend to be a lot more thin. Yeah. No, there's some toothed whales with really weird teeth out there that we don't really know what they use them for.
It, it doesn't appear that they are very well suited to like taking big chunks of.
That's what you would think, but I mean, yeah, like that is something that I really wonder about because orcas, if you look at orcas, like there are current, macrophagous predator, like, right, they've got a fairly short snout. But we also know that sperm whales were macrophagous back in the day, and they don't look super duper well adapted to that life because they've got like this big, spermaceti organ at the front. So I whales love to defy our conventions.
Size of the sperm.
Yeah, that's a prey item. Yes, that is. Yep. Exactly. There are certain features that we think might be indicative of macrophagy in fossils. So if the projector will cooperate, let me pull up Squalodon, because he is the best example of this. Come on, Brendo. So Squalodon, for example, has, where is my cursor? So the front teeth, you can see that like the roots are really thick. And we know that Squalodon typically has like these very puffy inflated roots. And that's probably a type of like mineralized tissues similar to bone called cementum. And that could really, we see it, for example, macrophagous sperm whales have, their teeth are like huge with cementum. So that could be to absorb shock, or to anchor the teeth more firmly in the alveoli. I went back to like my advisor's dissertation because he described, it's basically like the book on Durodon. And his study suggested that, they're probably biting something off and then shearing it with their back teeth. And another paper that I was looking at also suggested something similar. And that's why the wear on the back teeth is not as severe as the wear on the front teeth, because the front ones are the ones that are like pulling something away. But you might notice that the front teeth are not very well preserved. So I couldn't look for that kind of wear. But that is kind of my going evidence for probably Macrophagus. They also have more features along the snout, like their teeth interlock. And that's also thought to be related to having a stronger bite. I just yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, it's brutal to watch. But the thing that like really gets me, especially about these early tooth whales, is their snouts are so long, right? If you are an orca, you can kind of do that sort of tearing because you have a broad, shorter snout. You can create that force. Slender snouts are not really suited to handling those kind of floats. They're much more suited towards just like grabbing a fish really fast. So initially that was what I was like, it's probably just grabbing a fish really fast. But the more I looked at the jaw musculature, I'm like, you don't need that kind of space to catch a fish. Because it wouldn't really help you be faster. It would help you be stronger.
Zoom chat wants to know, have you personally found a whale fossil?
In a museum drawer. I have not done a lot of my own collections research, primarily because we have a lot of stuff in collections. For my dissertation, I really wanted to see like what is data that is out there but kind of lost. And when we don't have good pictures of something, when it's not thoroughly described in terms of its anatomy, like when we describe a new fossil by its anatomy, it's like a space alien could reconstruct this thing from the pictures and the text. If it's not English, English is basically the lingua franca of science now. When those sorts of things aren't met, that data is lost. So I was really invested in trying to be like, where can we take this data and make it useful again? I would love to go out and explore the Calvert Cliffs. I'm always thrilled when my coworkers bring in something really cool and they're always like, Maru, look what we found. Like one of my coworkers found a Squalodon and was like, look, Maru, I found it, the Squalodon. And I'm like, yes. Wow, look at that tooth wear. So yeah, I have not ever found my own whale fossil. One day I'll actually go do field work.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
That was awesome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Do you mind? Here's one more question
Oh.
coming in. What other animals with this kind of whale have lived in harmony with?
In harmony. Oh.
Right. And also what might have preyed on it. So a little bit about
Yeah. So I'm gonna resist the temptation to go on a tangent about Moby Dick because I just triggered my brain. That's how my brain works. Someone says something to me and I'm like, well, that's just like chapter 58 of Moby Dick. And my friends would be like, oh my God, how do you even know the chapter numbers? The evidence for Eosqualon living with the sea cow is not great just because they do exist in different layers. We don't have them overlapping. In the Calvert ecosystem, we've got, seals, pinnipeds, turtles, Um, other sirenians, stuff like that. As for what their predators would be, like we know that in the Calvert Formation there were macrophagous sperm whales. We've never found like a complete one, but their teeth are there. So we know that they're there. I would say like if anything's going to chomp on those guys, it's probably going to be them because they are larger than most other dolphins in the ecosystem. Well, that doesn't necessarily stop orcas from eating things that are way bigger than them. But I'm convinced that orcas, like we can't even compare them to other dolphins anymore. Like they're often their own world.